listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys college football podcast where we talk about things that happen in the world of, yep, you guessed it, college football. By the way, I do have my voice back this week. Last week was a bit of a struggle. And this week, Brother John, he's on vacation.
This week on beach duty.
Yes. We say
How does he get a vacation?
Well, it's because it's his anniversary week, and we say happy anniversary to the Nelsons, John and Patty, as they enjoy their trip down to the beaches.
And Rowdy.
Yes, and Rowdy. Don't forget about that.
But we do have Brother John Wilkerson joining us from the College Football X. Thanks for joining us, Brother Wilkie. Of course, Marty and Brother John Fox here, along with me. And guys, we're down to the end of the playoff here. The semifinals were this past weekend, and both the games were, for the most part, pretty good and competitive games. Before we get into Marty's favorite team, we'll start with the Notre Dame-Penn State game. What'd you guys think about that? Notre Dame got the win, but it was a lot of work.
It was a lot closer than I expected.
Yeah, it was a lot closer than I expected too, and it was a tale of two halves because Penn State had it all going for them in the first half, and then I don't know what was said in the locker room by Coach Freeman, but it definitely worked because they came on that first drive. They had to score on that first drive, and they did, and that just changed the entire complexity of that game. Penn State had moments in the second half, but man, Notre Dame was just grinding it out. And I really liked how that defense adjusted in the second half. And they took the deep ball away from Drew Aller. And man, I just thought they did a great job of getting stops when they needed to on defense. But Notre Dame did what they had to do. They got the key turnover late in the fourth quarter. People are already starting to argue about should Drew Aller thrown that ball. Hey man, you're in your early 20s. You're in the biggest game of your life at that point. We all know what we're like in our early 20s. It's tough to make great decisions.
Take the shot.
And the Notre Dame, take the shot. You got to get a first down. You're on third down, and that Notre Dame defender made a great read and a great play. Put him in position for that last second field goal. Which, you got to have luck on your side when you're sometimes in those big type of games. But hats off to Notre Dame. They're moving on to coming to Atlanta. The Fighting Irish are invading the ATL. Phil, we got to take cover.
Outside of black and white games, when was the last time there was a college football game where a wide receiver didn't catch a ball? Penn State goes, that's our new code at work for somebody that's lazy. You're a Penn State receiver because you don't do anything.
Well, you're probably looking at back in the 1980s. Brother Fox, what does it say about the coaching staff at Notre Dame that they were able to make those adjustments?
So first, let me give you the one jam band relate for the week, because shout out to Humphreys McGee, one of the great jam bands ever that we've been following for 20 years or so, in honor of them wearing the Summer Camp Music Festival hoodie, which they co-hosted with Mo for many years. They met at Notre Dame. I know they're going nuts. I hope you have a good time the next couple of weeks. But what I found really interesting.
Oh, we lost your audio.
Oh, technical difficulties. Let's see if we can get him back here because.
Let's do it the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
So Penn State had it all going their way until Riley Leonard left the field for concussion protocol. The backup came in and started throwing all over him, and they wound up getting the end of first half, beginning of second half thing. Wilkie, you're dead right. Once they came out in the second half and tied it up, the game completely changed. They realized they could throw on Penn State.
But let's give Steve Angeli his credit too, because there was no drop off when he came in.
It was an upgrade, certainly from a passing standpoint, at least
Right.
from the start of the game. And they certainly found something, and the momentum switched. And from that point on, it was anybody's game.
We've mentioned Notre Dame's defense. Notre Dame's defensive coordinator is Al Golden, who was a tight end at Penn State in the early 90s. I was just wondering what kind of emotions he was going through Coach Golden as this game was transpired, because that's his alma mater, although his paychecks are now signed by Notre Dame. So I know where
Still at the end of
the
the day.
loyalty lies. I mean, and I'm really impressed about how he's gone about it as a defensive coordinator. When I knew Al Golden when he was the head coach of Miami, he was an offensive guy. After he left Miami, he was a tight ends coach for the Detroit Lions. He's rehabbed his career into a defensive coach and has become he's fast becoming one of the top defensive coordinators, if not the top defensive coordinator in the country. He's up for the Broyles Award, which will be announced soon. That was an interesting aspect to me, seeing how he's developed as a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, he's definitely a well-rounded coach. I mean, he knows how to attack a defense, and in turn, that's going to help you know how to defend it.
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world. That Notre Dame defense, they are tight. They basically manhandled Georgia the week before and kept a pretty well-balanced Penn State team in some control over the course of the game.
And they're not that big either. I mean, but they're just fundamentally sound. That's the impressive part to me, is just how they get to the ball. They surround the ball and they get the guy down, which
kind of like their head coach when he played.
Exactly. I mean, their physicality really impressed me against Penn State. I think they did a great job.
Well, one thing I was prepared to come on and talk about today was I was shocked that a couple calls went against Notre Dame in the second half. That pass interference call on the pick. I couldn't believe in my lifetime I'd really never seen that happen in Notre Dame. It happened a couple of times, and they fought through it and really were, by the end of the game, to me, looked like the better team.
Well, I mean, I guess you can call it a controversial call that pick on the pass interference, although that Notre Dame DB never turned around and searched for the ball.
You got to look for the ball.
My question is, I guess if you're on a controversial standpoint, is does that call get called toward the end of a game like that, especially like a semifinal? I mean, you see those type of things happen toward the end of the game and the flag stays in the pocket. That was one of those situations where the flag came out in a critical part of a semifinal game late in the fourth quarter. Turned out that didn't affect the outcome that much, because Notre Dame got the interception, got the field goal at the end of the game, and are moving on. But that was what's interesting to me, guys, is how Notre Dame is now kind of become that lovable underdog now. I mean, they're like Duke basketball. I mean, everybody hated them. And now
I still hate them.
Freeman has turned them into lovable underdogs.
Yeah, especially what's impressive to me is the way they bounced back after an early season loss to Northern Illinois. And that could have completely derailed their season, but yet it didn't.
Yeah, well, they didn't have a conference to worry about either.
No, but
they play 5 ACC teams.
The schedule wasn't that light.
That don't count against the conference, so
yeah,
there's that.
And then there's the team that they're going to be playing in the championship game, the Ohio State Buckeyes. And we might as well just let let Marty start things off here because Marty was actually there to see Ohio State and Texas.
Yeah, unluckily, a few friends of the family didn't make it. They actually were over by you guys in Atlanta at the airport for a while before they got sent back to Ohio about 6 or 7 canceled flights later.
Wow.
That game, though,
For those of you wondering, the weather was a bit of an issue in the southern U.S. over the last few days.
yeah, credit to the city of Arlington. Anything remotely close to that stadium, perfectly clear, no ice. They had everything working well out at the stadium. You know, unlike the Super Bowl that was there prior, because that was a concern with the way they handled that stuff. But game wise, you know, that was coming in there. It sounded like a Texas home game. It was loud, but it was loud for both sides. But it was definitely a bit of Texas flavor. I was kind of worried about. Yeah, they closed down the entire airport. So I was kind of worried about how the crowd was going to be there, if there was going to be a lot of empty seats from a lot of people that didn't, that couldn't show up. But man, that atmosphere was just unbelievable. It was kind of interesting with how Texas was playing, the best receiver on the field, Smith. You know, I wonder if Notre Dame's going to try to emulate that because, while it did, we had one catch for 3 yards. He affected almost every other play, though. If he went to the right, safeties would shift to the right, and then you run left, and there's nobody in the second level to stop anybody. I mean, that screen pass right at the end of the half, that was unbelievable. We were debating, like, should we go run and grab something? They're going to kneel down, then all of a sudden, boom.
Didn't.
There's three linemen looking for somebody to hit, and then they hit him, and it looked like Mario Kart, like he just hit one of those speed bumps and gone. That was unreal.
Yeah, you almost got to think, and we'll probably talk about this a little later or next week, but you almost got to think Notre Dame's got to make the adjustment of playing Smith straight up and maybe having another safety on him and not committing so much as a decoy, because yes, that screen pass to Quinshawn Jenkins, he had nothing but real estate in front of him by the time he made the catch. And quite honestly, I thought they were going to get the Will Howard before he was able to release the ball the way it looked, at least on television. But he got it. He got the ball out just in time. Made a great throw to Jenkins. He had nothing but open real estate. And you talk about really turning the tide of the game, because Texas, and you were there, Marty, there was a lot of momentum going on their side heading to halftime.
It took the air out of the Ohio State section, and then all of a sudden, everything just absolutely went nuts. That touchdown, you said, was that 75 yards?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how this is going to play out in the championship game. You've got Texas primarily zone defense, and then Notre Dame's kind of more of a man up, which that kind of matchup favors Ohio State with how physical their receivers are.
The one thing about Texas is their secondary, that back line was very aggressive against the run all year. And they would they would come from full bore into the backfield. Having those guys committed to Smith most of the game kind of took that aggressiveness away. Yes, there were times where they were effective in some of the open space plays that Ohio State has, but for the most part, they were taken out of that aggression that they have against the run game, which I thought was going to come back and bite them in the backside, and they never adjusted back to being aggressive against Ohio State's runs. So, but the one thing about that game that kind of epitomized everything to me was that final drive by Texas, where they put themselves on the doorstep in a position, and they just kind of melted down on offense because they knew how good Ohio State is, not only goal line stands, but how aggressive and how physical they are inside. And they were kind of out physicaling Texas at that point, their defensive line against Texas's offensive line. And they tried to do some of this option sweep out to the wide, and the lateral speed of Ohio State was a little bit of a shock to them. To me, it was just an offensive meltdown by Texas. They weren't confident enough in their offense to try to bull their way into the end zone. And that last play, the fumble recovery, the takeaway for a touchdown.
Roommate on roommate crime.
Roommate on roommate crime, as Brother John Nelson called it. That was just the epitomized that entire drive. They weren't confident. They were shaken by that Ohio State defense, and that run by who was it that
Jack Sawyer
right now? Jack Sawyer. Thank you. By Jack Sawyer taking it all the way and sealing the deal for Ohio State. That just kind of epitomized the end of the game for Texas. Their offense just melted down at that point.
Yeah, the way the back half of Ohio State's defense was taken after him. Having Sonny Styles, that body type, where last year as a freshman he was playing as a safety, and they converted him into a linebacker. That kind of speed, combined with Downs back there, and that guy's unbelievable.
I'll ask this question to Brother Fox here. What does it say about Ohio State that 2 or 3 years ago we were talking about them having basically a window dressing at defense, and all of a sudden this team arguably is just as good on defense now as it is on offense?
So, to me, it has a lot to do with the rise of Michigan over the past 5, when Harbaugh was there, that they felt they were getting beat up physically, and they still are to some degree. But by getting manhandled by Michigan over the years, they had to do something to compete with them, and it's helped them tremendously in these playoffs. And I'm also going to show my age here a bit. I want to address one other thing. From watching on TV, I really liked the Cotton Bowl being in the Dome, and it reminded me when Texas played Miami in the Cotton Bowl in '90. It seemed like a very different atmosphere when they got crushed in that game, and also in the late '70s, I believe it was Joe Montana when in the freezing cold won a game in the Cotton Bowl. It just seemed like with the way college football is going, the level it's attained, having it in the Dome in that beautiful building just seemed a lot more exciting. And Marty, you were there to hear it. It must have been
it was definitely
an electric atmosphere versus
it was absolutely insane. But with Ohio State's defense, a lot of it comes this year, especially it came with, like you mentioned earlier in the season, the 2 losses. You kind of had a come to Jesus moment after the Oregon loss where they started changing up some things, and Ryan Day just completely stepped out of the offensive practices and worked on the defense. And then after the Michigan game, there was a come to Jesus where I'm not going to say any other coaches' names, but the defensive line kind of wanted one thing and the rest of the defense really needed another, where they wanted to, part of their problem was, you have your 2 bookends and they weren't as fresh at the end of the game, and they weren't doing rotations like they have been the last, since they've gone on this little streak. And you've been seeing a lot more of that rotation. And as far as like the players go, it kind of galvanized everybody. They did the infamous players only meeting and then a direct meeting with the head coach. And it kind of got everybody focused and on the same page. And I think a lot of it is, the coaches coming together on defense and being more in tune with how the defensive backs affect the line and how the line rotations and getting more people in, making them fresher at the end of the game. That's been a big difference.
Well, defensive coordinator Jim Knowles has a reputation of being very old school, very aggressive. He used to have this bend and no break attitude when he was at Oklahoma State, but that's obviously changed when he got to Ohio State for the good. And so he's one of the top DCs out there in college football. And John, to go to your point about having the Cotton Bowl in that atmosphere, look, I attended 2 Cotton Bowls back in the late '80s. And it was cold. And that stadium back then showed its age. It looked like it was built in the 30s. And yeah, and Marty will attest, it's not in a good part of Dallas either.
No.
But and
Although
I've been
in
to
their
some
favor,
regular,
you can actually take public transportation and get there easily.
right. Well, and I've been to some regular season games there too, and it was just no atmosphere, and again, the stadium showed its age. And I know I heard there's a new multi-million-dollar plan to refurbish the Cotton Bowl.
They are going to do a major renovation with that, but we'll see.
So that stadium exists really for the Oklahoma-Texas game is really all it exists for, in the State Fair. But yeah, it was an outstanding atmosphere. Marty, you were there. You could kind of feel it in the television broadcast as well. How crazy it was.
Yeah. The only bad part is my wife and I got really chilly after Jack ran that back, because those doors were wide open behind us and they were just blowing a cold breeze in. We had a breeze of people coming this way past us up the stairs, and then the doors were constantly open because they were running out in droves.
Actually, Marty, since you brought that up, my wife had a question for you. She wanted me to ask. She's a big opponent of these windows in the dome stadiums, putting sun on the field at different points of the games. Do you have a view?
If you're smart enough to make those windows north-south and not make it so that you can take a picture of the other stadium that's close by, if you do form over fashion, then you're in better shape. That's why it's not an issue at most other stadiums. Also, if you own curtains, hang them up when the sun's out.
Yeah.
Yeah, put some attention into where those windows actually are, and then you don't have a problem.
Yeah.
And by the way, Marty, just so you know, Ohio State fans are turning on my dog Daisy. She picked Texas over Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. And on our TikTok post, some of the Ohio State comments were rather comical. One of my favorites was calling her a traitor, which I replied, and at the end, called her a traitor and put OH. And I responded saying, IO, the owner of Daisy disagrees with his dog.
Now, everybody's got to remember that it's Ohio State fans. That might have been from the lunatic fringe, as Herbie likes to say. The very first one where she picked against Ohio State, right after she ate from that bowl, she did knock it over, then start eating out of the Ohio State one at the very end of that video.
Yeah.
But you get that with fans from the both sides. Like I had to correct one of my fellow Ohio State fans when they were towards the end of the game, when they started being a little unruly and they went and sat back down after running their mouth to somebody. I'm like, and then I looked at the people that were getting heckled, and I was like, we're not all like that. He's going to go sit down. But you kind of see that a little bit on both sides. But I got to say, for the most part, the Texas fans were gracious. As we're going downstairs to they have this thing called a tall cotton tailgate. We ran into a lot of Texas fans, and most of them came up and they're like, kick the crap out of Notre Dame. We support you. And then, that was kind of nice when you see you hear about some of these people that are just jerks, and you're going to get that with anything. But for the most part, the Texas fans were great coming out of there.
Guys, without getting too far into predictions for the championship game, which will be another episode next week, one of the things we talked about pre-show is the move, at least this season, with Ohio State and Notre Dame playing Ohio versus Indiana. You saw a season where it was a lot of Midwestern football that had the most success, and all the hype almost every year is, well, the SEC is going to dominate, Georgia's going to dominate, Alabama's going to dominate. It's going to be all about the SEC, and this year, not so much.
Yeah, you look at 1AA, Division II, Division III. Even with club football, if Ohio State can pull off a national championship, they will have won the Division I national championship, and their club team won the club team national championship. Which is I really love that they've got a program like that where the kids are doing fun. I mean, it's almost like when you're in Pee Wee baseball where you're doing fundraisers to make sure you got enough stuff for your uniforms. The team the real team hands down equipment to these guys, and it's all they're just playing because they love football. And it'd be kind of cool to see that a double championship like that.
Interesting. Congrats to the Buckeyes for winning the club championship as well. To me, it's I think what the Midwestern teams are doing, and this also goes to the out west as well, is they finally have seen the light that if you get in your interior line big athletic guys that dictate the terms, and some of those guys are now staying home in the Midwest and playing for the Big Ten, playing in the Big 12. And so I think that's the big difference. If you get down to it, is these guys are starting to stay home, and coaches are recognizing that we can put all the speed and skill out there, but unless you got guys that can block, unless you got guys in the interior line that can tackle, it really doesn't serve you to have all these great athletes out in the open space when they're running for their lives, and quarterbacks as well. Yeah. I think that's the big improvement as to why you're seeing Big 10 teams and Big 12 teams and ACC teams starting to catch up. And in the Big 10, they have caught up. And so I think that's the big reason why you're seeing a shift in dominance by conferences. Now, SEC fans are gonna bitch and moan about the whole time because they're very passionate about their schools, but so are Big 10 schools, and I can tell you some of the Big 12 schools are like that too. ACC maybe a few, but that to me has been the big difference. It's the interior line, and look, there's passionate fan bases outside the SEC. We're just now starting to discover some of that. Who knew they had football fans in Indiana? But now we know. Yeah. And they were pretty passionate about their Hoosier program.
Their only two losses are the teams playing next week.
True. That's true.
I'm curious whether. Oh, go ahead, Marty. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, you're bringing up finding the Midwest corn-fed guys. Look at North Dakota State, Division I AA. Who wouldn't take a lineman from there if they entered the portal? Montana, they had a tackle under the portal. He'd even make it to the weekend after the game. He already got picked up by a Big 10 school. And he had visits lined up to Big 10, SEC, and I can't remember who else, but he got snapped up, I believe, by Michigan State. There's no lack of talent and large individuals in that area of the country. And it showed this year when every championship for every level of football is in that footprint.
And they're getting developed too. That's the other thing. And so everybody's taking that ethos of Nick Saban to have those interior line guys dictate the terms, and we're seeing the shift.
Thank you, Wilkie, for transitioning perfectly into what I was going to talk about. We don't know the answer yet, but I'm curious whether this is cyclical to any degree, because you don't have Saban or Urban Meyer at SEC schools anymore. I mean, if Shane Beamer got his mind right, maybe South Carolina can make a run next year, and Kirby Smart's still there. But that's a possibility. We don't know if that with NIL that all this money in the northern
definitely leveled the
been unlocked. Yeah.
Yeah,
has evened it a little bit. So this will be interesting to play out, whether it's a 1 year, 2 year deal or a long-term trend.
Alabama is begging for NIL money. Think about it. Doesn't that blow your mind?
Yeah,
that's a lot.
There's nobody it's not, though.
I think all of those things can be true at the same time. I think there is some cycling going on here, but I also think what Wilkie got onto about the interior line play, bigger, faster, stronger, has made a difference. But then I think the other part of that also is NIL money, and some of those schools in different parts of the country have money or can get access to that money and are using it to get themselves on that same level as some of these teams that have been elite for the last decade.
Look at Ole Miss.
Mhm.
I mean, their booster base is who they are, but they're getting more NIL money than most programs in the country. They're one of the top NIL programs. Why? Because they've got their fans now investing in the product rather than just the mega donor or the insurance agent from Oxford who just prints money. You've got the mom and pops now starting to contribute. And that's what the Alabamas are trying to do now. There's only so much industry in that state. Plus, you've got other Division I programs that you want to fund as well. So you got to go to the grassroots, and the grassroots got to contribute now. God knows where ticket prices are going to be going and what fees are going to come up with now.
Don't even go on SeatGeek and look at that game next week.
Oh, well, I'm just talking about a general regular season game. How much fees are going to be attached to when you buy something from the concessions, or if you buy a T-shirt? I think we're going to start seeing much more of that, and all these junk fees are going to be added on to tickets, all because they got to fund these NIL programs. Because I got a feeling that these mega donors are getting tapped out. They've invested so much in facilities that's stopped now. That you're not going to see any new facilities come up state of the art for a long time because of the NIL, because that's where the investment has to be. You haven't seen that many coaching changes this year because the buyouts.
But you're also talking about conferences that have payouts from ESPN ranging anywhere from $30 to $60 million a year.
Yeah, but everybody but Notre Dame has to split that equally among, especially you're in a super conference now. So like in the Big Ten,
Ohio State's got to share all that winning money for their playoff run with all the other Big Ten teams.
Yeah,
Notre Dame doesn't have
Notre Dame will pocket 20 million. Ohio State will get, 1 point something, and it'll go to the rest of the teams in the conference as well.
No, you're doing the math wrong there. We're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about the additional playoff games. You're getting a windfall, but it's split equally in your conference.
Everything is split equally in the conference, with the exception of the ACC, which I think is starting to skew things toward Clemson. I think everything is distributed evenly.
I think you're misinterpreting what I'm saying here. Is they've got the $1 billion TV contract that has to be split amongst everybody, and when your payout comes, you're getting $50 to $60 million.
Yeah, but that's just basically an even playing field against the people you're bidding against for players. They got to get I know it sounds crazy, but you got to get the salary cap in college football sometime soon to kind of rein in this Wild West situation we got going on.
Yeah, because you want to talk about salary caps. That brings us to an NIL issue that cropped up this very week. And that's Georgia quarterback, well, I guess now former University of Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, who got hurt in the SEC championship game and had surgery on his UCL ligament. Initially declared that he was going to the NFL, and then just a couple of days later, this week to be more specific, he announced, I think I'm going to go into the transfer portal.
Okay, when somebody announces they're going to go to the NFL but doesn't file the paperwork during the, before or after, right after the announcement, that's called a bidding war.
Yeah, and it's
but I also think he got some
agent move.
I also think he got some information from the NFL that, you're not going to be a first round pick. You might be a 5th or 6th round pick. Mm-hmm. So the signing bonuses aren't going to be as lucrative, and he may be sitting on the bench for a while. So another year at college might do you some good.
Yeah, take a look at what he's going to make, and then what your backup makes in the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to say, and what ended up happening, he spent exactly 1 day being wooed and courted by the University of Miami. Lo and behold, he's going to Coral Gables next year for reportedly around $3 million, which is more than most NFL backups make.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it used to be a joke in the 90s that college basketball players made more in college than they did in the pros, but it's real life now.
Yeah.
Eric Dickerson said he did, but
Well, he did. He
yeah.
got in nicer cars too.
Quick thing about revenue sharing. Thank you for bringing that up. Previously, I haven't delved into how this all works, but I did hear that Illinois, for example, who had a $4 million NIL budget last year, will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 or 14 going forward. So that's an enormous difference for the other teams in the league. Be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Yeah, there was talk of some teams doing NIL surcharges on tickets. I know Ohio State, when they do their spring game, the spring game ticket sales, which are, if you want to take your kid to the stadium for their first experience there, it's fairly cheap, but they basically earmark, spring game goes to NIL. So come out, support NIL, go to the stadium that you can't afford to go to during the regular season.
5-10 years ago, it never costed a thing to go to a spring game. You could just say you wanted to go and show up.
Yeah, or they would do like a canned food drive for the local food bank.
Yeah.
We had that at Youngstown.
Sorry, Phil, to your point about the bidding wars, again, interesting whether throwing money around for these teams will pay dividends on the field, or it'll be like some Major League Baseball teams that sign people to huge contracts and then wind up being middling teams anyway. But they did have the ability to say they won a bidding war. So Miami's an interesting case for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Miami last year spending well over $1.5 million to bring in Cam Ward, who had a super successful season from his perspective, but didn't get the Hurricanes into the college football playoff.
Yeah,
No, but they had a really good year, one that we didn't expect. And Carson Beck, who his receivers are going to be. I mean, some of those guys from Georgia might follow him to Miami. So obviously there's a good receiving core already in place that, although the money and the girlfriend helped a lot, but you got to look what's going on the field too. And if he's confident he's got some guys he can throw to and can convince some of the Georgia guys to transfer as well, then he's in a good position. He's going to be coached by a really good coaching staff. Mario Cristobal's staff is top notch. And he's going to have an opportunity to get the team in the playoff because Miami's got the talent to make another run for an ACC title and this year get into the playoff.
Well, it's fascinating though. He won't even be able to throw the ball during the spring as he recovers from that elbow surgery.
I don't think he's going to forget how to throw a football.
No, but
without spring practice.
No. You still got to build your arm back
but
up.
There's something to be said for the timing you have developed with your receivers and the rapport with your line and knowing how your line moves.
And off the clock, they're going to do that. Yeah, I can guarantee you, off the clock, they're going to go.
They're going to go around the practice timing rules.
No, that doesn't happen. Well, I'm interested to see what happens with Quinn Ewers because he's basically have said he's not going to play college football next year, but his mind might change too. He's got reportedly a $6 million offer from a rival school to be their quarterback. And will he make more that 1 year than he would be in the NFL? That's what he has to weigh. But all reports indicate he's going to go in the draft. And I think he's going to be drafted high. But, can he score a bigger paycheck for a year?
And possibly bump up that draft position.
Bump up the draft position, yes.
So Wilkie, good. Thanks for bringing that up too. I had a question for those of you who follow Texas more closely. Will the Texas fan base be happy to see Quinn Ewers move on and have Arch Manning move in to the starting spot, or did they want him there to begin with?
They're ready for Arch.
Yeah, they're ready for Arch.
Yeah.
And Arch is ready to take control. But if Quinn Ewers goes to that rival school, a certain rivalry is going to be really interesting.
Say the team name. Say the team name.
It's a very famous play from Rodgers and Hammerstein.
We're see how educated our fans are.
Exactly. Just reportedly, or allegedly, whichever term you rather use. But that would make it very interesting. But no, they're ready for Arch Manning to take over. I mean, he's been an apprentice for 2 years. It's his time.
Yeah.
And the fans are, if he stayed, the fans would still riot to get him on the field. They're so ready for him. I was hearing chants for him during the game.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out because Ewers, while he certainly will get drafted if he decides to stick it out and go to the NFL draft, from what I've read, he's not in the upper tier of quarterbacks right now in this upcoming draft, even though that draft doesn't feature a lot of really good quarterbacks outside of Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, and a couple of other guys.
Yeah, the narrative this year doesn't work out for him.
No.
Next year he goes on a run, gets himself invited to New York. Boom, that's a whole nother, that's millions. Not to mention he'll be a millionaire before he gets there if he stays.
Right.
Yeah, which isn't to say he's not one already.
Yeah, I was going to say Carrollton's not exactly a poor high school district that he went to.
No.
He's making a couple bucks. I mean, the whole reason he went to Ohio State in the first place, he declared early, state of Texas won't let high school players make money off NIL, so he went to Ohio State so that he could endorse some kombucha tea, I think it was. And then soon as he could transfer back after he established he was a college player, he immediately came back. He was in Ohio for 5 months or so. They got to rein this NIL stuff in. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to be talking salaries matching Major League Baseball payrolls at this point.
Yeah. I mean, Underwood, he said at 10 million, he said he wasn't going to go to Michigan. And then all of a sudden it became 12 million and he changed, he flipped over and signed.
Met his number.
That's one guy for 12.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And you gotta run the risk of, you look what happened at A&M last year and a year prior where they signed, number one recruiting class in the country and they had all that 5-star talent. And, they were like Georgia players getting popped for speeding. I mean, one guy live streamed driving 70 miles an hour in the school parking deck, and that team completely fell apart and everybody left after their first season there. You got to watch how that's going to affect the locker room, much like the NFL.
Yeah. Couple of other interesting notes here as we kind of wind things down on this episode. You're talking about guys who made some interesting decisions. Abdul Carter from Penn State will be declaring for the NFL draft.
He's ready.
Yeah. He's an NFL player now.
Yeah.
Is he a defensive end or outside linebacker at that size?
Pass rusher.
Okay.
We'll just call him an edge.
Okay.
Yeah, and another interesting note is now former LSU wide receiver Kyron Lacey, who is wanted for a hit-and-run crash death in Baton Rouge. He declared for the NFL after the crash.
Well, the man needs to pay a lawyer.
Yeah. Lacey is wanted for charges of negligent homicide and felony hit and run in connection with the December 17th crash. The incident occurred a couple of days before he posted a farewell message to LSU on social media, and he didn't play in their bowl game. I wonder why.
Unbelievable. Just when you think you've seen the most tone-deaf thing you've ever seen, you get something like that.
Yeah.
Nothing surprises me anymore.
Yeah, and I also find it fascinating.
He's going to get picked in the 3rd round by the Mean Machine.
What I'm seeing happening with people.
Good one, Marty.
He's an Al Davis type player, don't you think?
Oh God.
Al Davis is dead.
Well, I do know that, but Marty brings up the mean machine.
Um, what do you guys think about this thing with guys jumping into the transfer portal and moving to another school, but leaving this quote unquote emotional post on social media saying how much he loved his time at X school and it'll always be in his heart, but he's moving on to another school to
PR
play.
move.
That's the college version of putting open to work on your LinkedIn profile. That's all that is.
Exactly.
Because you know it's
Exactly.
going to get retweeted. So you're basically saying, hey, agents, call my agent. I'm open for some NIL deals. Give me a bag.
Yeah. My last two seasons at X school were the greatest 2 seasons of my life, and I will be forever indebted to X University for giving me the opportunity to play ball. But I've decided to further my career by moving on into the transfer portal.
That being said, that I love this place. Anybody willing to pay me $1 more, I'm
Yeah.
happy to talk to.
Well, that and it's empty words if he goes to a rival school.
Yeah.
That's just the
I mean,
TV
it's
execs
a PR
are
move. It's a PR move.
the TV execs are like pulling for a lot of those moves.
Yeah, and then there's people in the fan base like, "Oh, he meant so much to us. He didn't mean shit to you. He's a freaking mercenary.
Unbelievable.
Call it for what it is."
We
I'm
got
a
free
merc-
agency. Next thing coming is the salary cap and trades.
Yeah, or limits on the free agent signings.
Again, I always go back to what are the coaches going through right now? Do you really want to be a college football coach? I mean, you bring these kids in, you recruit them, and then are they committed to you?
No loyalty.
Yeah, there's no loyalty anymore. It's a 24/7, 365 job. It's what it's become because not only you have to bring them in, you got to keep them happy, and you're dealing with 18, 19-year-old kids who have gotten more money than they thought they'd ever make in their lifetime and not mature enough to handle it, and not mature enough to handle what comes with the responsibility that comes with having a wad of hundreds in your pocket. Again, why would anybody want to be a college coach right now? Because you're never home. You're constantly babysitting. This is what this whole era has kind of what's happening. And then basically all you're doing is trying to get an NFL job because at least there you'll have a life, or stay in the high school ranks because you get summers off and you work your camp or two.
Unless you're Bill Belichick.
Well,
Well,
even then, his
he's an
name's getting
exception.
floated again.
He's an exception. And, it got me to thinking about this because I don't know if you guys saw the comments from UCLA men's basketball head coach Mick Cronin about his team.
Yep.
It kind of took me aback how he was criticizing his team for not giving effort. Having the most energy, even getting on his coaching staff for being that way. And I understand it's UCLA. They're dealing with all the devastation with the fires right now. I'm sure that was weighing on his mind a little bit. But it also shows me that, and I don't know if this is happening in college football or not, but where's the guy's interest? If they're getting the checks, are they giving you their all? Or is somebody, I'm sure they are, somebody in the background telling them, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You just keep doing this and you're going to get your paychecks.
I don't think he was wrong. It may
I
not
don't
have
think
come
he
out
was wrong either. I don't like the tact he took doing it in a press conference after a tough loss. That might be something more addressed in a different setting because the emotions are raw. But to me, and I think we're seeing this more in men's college basketball than we are in football right now. Kids are just not getting developed or don't care. They're getting their check and they're getting influenced by other people outside, and the coaches can't control that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look, shifting this over a little bit to basketball. These kids come up, they play for their local school, and then they're on one or two club teams. So they're not they're being raised in a manner that breeds no loyalty. Like, they're like, I've got 4 jerseys at home. I got to make sure I put the right one in my bag for where I'm going to play today. It doesn't lend itself to sticking with one team because, you've got so many people willing to just let you walk over and come and play. And I'm worried that college football is going to go more that way.
It
I
is.
mean, I was alarmed, and John, I know you're a huge college basketball fan like me. I was alarmed when Tony Bennett and Jim Larrañaga just abruptly left.
Yeah.
Those guys I personally know, and I know their passion for the game, especially Tony's, coming from a college basketball family, but to abruptly leave like they did show, and this is for all college athletics. But this is particularly in the men's college basketball. There's something wrong when you got guys like that who just are leaving and abruptly. Wouldn't you agree?
Completely. One thing about the Mick Cronin deal is hats off to my good friend Doug Anderson, who is very anti-Mick Cronin, who after it happened texted me and said this is a trick that he uses, that when he sees the upcoming schedule that against lower level teams in the league, that he'll criticize his team publicly, and then when they win, ultimately, if they win those games, then he looks like he lit a fire under them. Didn't quite work as they got shellacked at Maryland game after that. But to your point about Tony Bennett, Jim Larrañaga, to me, these are the pure coaches which leads me to my other point of what's the staffing like in a college football or college basketball program these days it seems like you'd have to have a general manager, a director of player personnel, or some.
There are teams that actually have that now.
Yes.
It was just a few years ago. You never heard of that. Now it's starting to become more and more common.
And I imagine the same with Jim Larrañaga at his age. He was an incredible coach. I wouldn't want to deal with all that either if I were in his position.
I mean, in the pros, you hear a director of player development, but how often have you heard that for a college team? And it's more and more commonplace.
Well, the GM roles are becoming more and more in college football. That's for sure. You're seeing that more and more with the major college programs. Yes, there'll be director of player personnel. It's going to be structured like an NFL team. Watch what Bill Belichick's going to do with North Carolina, because that's going to be what college football programs are going to be 5-10 years from now. You're going to have all these fancy titles for the personnel department that are employed by the university. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it takes some of the pressure off the assistant coaches from having to go out and recruit all these guys. Maybe you can just have a staff of scouts or consultants or whatever you want to term them that do that for them.
Payroll managers.
Yeah, it's not a title yet, but everybody's going to need a director of player retention. Because
true,
you got to have somebody that's going to be. I mean, how much time is it going to take to try to figure out who's trying to be poached from your team and take steps to counteract that? I mean, it's impossible to try to stop somebody from leaving while trying to bring somebody. I mean, you look at the teams that are in the playoff now. You're trying to game plan. You just wrapped up your recruiting, and then people are hitting the portal left and right. How can you bring somebody in for a visit when you're trying to travel during a snowstorm and prepare for a playoff game and possibly a game after that game? It's insane.
Yeah, it's impossible. And
NCAA, get a commissioner and organize this stuff.
Well, I think college football and college basketball might want to have to go that route as well. I think it's much tougher in college basketball because the poaching has been pretty commonplace in college basketball as of late. They used to leave them alone. College basketball was much better in college football as far as leaving. Once a guy committed, they didn't touch him anymore. That's changed. and with the NIL. But again, you've got guys that are college football and college basketball lifers that are they've just had enough and moving on. To me, that alarms me, that those type of guys are being forced out of the profession.
It's going to kill development.
Yeah.
Yeah. To quote, all I could think of as we've been talking about this is Rod Tidwell from Jerry Maguire saying, "Show me the money."
Yeah.
It's been that way. It's just in the open.
Guys, it's about time for us to start wrapping things up. One thing I wanted to mention before we put the end of it on this show, and next week we'll talk about who we think is going to win the college football national championship game. If you want to go to said national championship game, the day we record this, we are roughly 8 days away from the game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in beautiful downtown Atlanta, Georgia. Currently, the rough get-in price for that game is $1,518 for a ticket.
That's near the opening roof or staging room.
I'm pretty sure with the weather here lately, it's probably not going to be an open roof.
I think that's a good assumption.
Yeah. So anyway, that all being said, make sure you tune in next week where we'll tell you who we think is going to win that championship game. Guys, time to say goodbye to all our family. MICKEYMOUSE. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. For Brother John Fox, for Brother John Wilkerson, for Brother Marty Drzenko, I am Brother Phil Cantor. We are part of the OSG Sports team. Thank you for listening in, watching, tuning in, whatever it is that you do in order to take in our content. Hopefully, Brother John Nelson will be back with us next week, maybe from the beach, but hopefully he'll be here to make his choices as well. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week. So long, everybody. Bye.
Please like and subscribe and watch College Football X.